Here we go. He'll run it out to the 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game. Auburn's going to win the football game.
Dobbs drops back, looks, loads up, fires on for the end zone. The pass is going to be caught by Tennessee. Tennessee wins! Caught by Tennessee, Jawan Jennings. Jennings makes the catch in the end zone on the Hail Mary. I don't believe I saw that. To the right, Bennett to tight end left. Second and goal to go from the 2. Toss sweep right for James White. Tucks it under the right arm, cuts it upfield. Driving forward, diving to the goal line. A touchdown and a title for the Patriots.
I can't believe it.
They have completed the greatest comeback in Super Bowl history.
This is the Saturday 6 podcast. We are brought to you on this beautiful Saturday morning by Buyers Auto. Joining me now is the wonderful co-host Chris Mason. How are you?
Good. Good morning, CJ. How are you?
Doing well. It's a great Saturday. Starting to get a little bit colder on this side of the country, but we got daylight savings hitting this weekend, so get that extra hour of sleep in, and lots of good football to get to. Let's start off with our first game, which I think it could be a dandy, could be a blowout. Clemson at NC State. The Tigers, 7-1 on the year, head to Raleigh, North Carolina to play the Wolfpack of NC State, who are coming off that blowout loss to Notre Dame. Chris, sometimes I like teams coming off of blowout losses. You look at these two teams, what do you see?
They're very similar. Very similar. I think the biggest stat that stands out to me is that NC State allows 384 yards per game. I don't think that bodes too well for them coming into this tough matchup.
No, I think you're absolutely right. This team does a lot of things really well, but they're terrible defensively against the third down, and that's part of what is attributed to them allowing so many yards is they just can't get off the field. They rank 97th defensively in third down conversion percentage. And then on offense, while things look pretty most of the time, when this team gets into the red zone, Chris, they just can't score. They rank 106th in the country in red zone scoring. I don't think if you're playing Clemson, when you get into the red zone, you better be able to take your chance. You better be able to score when you're given the opportunity. And when you're on third down defensively, you better get off the field because this isn't an offense that thrives on efficiency. It's a very well-coached team. And late in the year is when Clemson puts things together.
That's right. It's this clutch factor, and I don't know that NC State as a team has it. I'll tell you what, though, this quarterback is clutch. Ryan Finley,
yes.
He's legit. I think we've talked about him on this show before. He's a junior, 6'4", 205 pounds, and can just throw the ball anywhere he wants it. He just puts it on a string sometimes. So I really like Ryan Finley, and I think he has one interception for the year and 12 touchdowns. That's an amazing stat.
So the line here, Chris, Clemson favored by 8.5, over under here 54. Should be noted, by the way, Clemson 4-3-1 against the spread this season. Here's what I like about the Tigers. This is one of the best defenses in the country, and they only allow 4 yards per play. Chris, we've looked at a lot of things with Clemson. They had that great game against Auburn. Now, we know they lost that one to Syracuse. I think you and I have said that one's a bit of an anomaly. That's not going to be the rule for Clemson. You look at how they played against Virginia Tech, only allowed 17 points against a great freshman quarterback. Played Georgia Tech last weekend. That was supposed to be a mismatch. Georgia Tech only scored 10. I think a lot of what Clemson does well is on the defensive side of the ball. Am I right?
Oh, yeah, they're amazing defensively. Their offense is nothing to shy away from, but they have great size and speed defensively. You're right that it was really surprising what they did to go back to the beginning of the season against Auburn. I forget, maybe did they allow 15 points in that game? It wasn't many. But they are holding teams to just a few points a game. And if their offense can just be okay and put up some points, I think they're going to be all right for the season.
Here's my biggest obstacle right now with NC State, Chris, is they've played two decent teams, South Carolina and Notre Dame. The rest of their schedule is Marshall, Furman, Florida State, who's not good anymore, Syracuse, who had the nice win, but they still have a losing record right now, Louisville, who's been bad the past several weeks, and Pittsburgh, who's been awful all season. Now, throughout all of that schedule, they've only beaten one team by 20 or more points, Furman. So this is a team, 8-point win against Syracuse, scored late to get a 14-point win against Louisville, struggled for a bit against Pittsburgh. I like a lot of things about NC State, but when they're asked to play against tough competition, this team just has not shown up this year.
Yeah, they really haven't played anybody except for getting blown out by Notre Dame. So it's really questionable as how good they actually are. Record looks good, but besides that, I mean, once you look into the details, it's tough.
Yeah, completely agree. All right, let's get to our picks. Line here again, Clemson 8.5 on the road going into NC State, 8.5-point favorite, over under 54. Chris, who do you have?
So there's always one game in these lineups that I'm like, gosh, I don't know, it's so close. And this is the first game here is the game for me. I have Clemson squeaking out a cover and a win, so winning by 9 against that 8.5-point line. Again, I'm not taking any money out of my wallet and putting it on it, but I have 33, Clemson 33, NC State 24.
That's a good pick. So you've got them going 38. Wait, you've got Clemson winning 38-24?
33-24.
33-24. Okay. Because that would have been interesting. So, listen, NC State, they do a lot of things well, but we know they have not played a big-time opponent. One note, if you're an NC State fan and you do want to put some money on this game, the Wolfpack have covered 6 of the past 10 games against Clemson, so keep that in mind going into this game. I still don't think they have a big win on the season. They lost to an okay South Carolina team, and they were blown out last week by Notre Dame, and I know Notre Dame's just kind of steamrolling right now. But Clemson's no stranger to big games. You're not going to surprise to them, and their only loss was to Syracuse without Kelly Bryant. Give me Clemson covering 8.5 points, 38-24. I've got Clemson winning that one. Next game, the Bedlam Bowl. So this is Oklahoma at Oklahoma State. The line here, Chris, Oklahoma State favored by 2.5. And the over-under, 76 points. Here's the interesting thing about Oklahoma State being favored, is Oklahoma has won 14 straight games in Oklahoma State and has covered the spread in 9 of those games. They've covered 7 of their past 10 overall. So, Chris, you look at this, I kind of wonder, is Vegas making a mistake by favoring the Cowboys in this one?
Well, I think the one thing that the Cowboys have going for them is it's at home. So that's going to bode well for them. Little home field, home court, field favorite here. So I think that's the main thing. If this thing was on a neutral field, they're saying it would be pretty close to even, and Oklahoma might be favored by a field goal if it was at Oklahoma. So I think it's going to be. I think that's probably pretty close. Although we'll get to my pick.
Okay.
I'll that for later.
Now, we talk about, Oklahoma State's won 14 straight Oklahoma's won 14 straight at Oklahoma State. They covered the spread in 9 of those 10 games. Here's an interesting note if you're a Sooners fan. The past 5 games have not been friendly to you. Just 1-4 against the spread in your last 5, and 2-6, by the way, in your last 8 last 8 on the road. That does not bode well for you. Chris, what I think this game comes down to is which offense plays better in this one. Oklahoma is 3rd in the country in passing yards, led by that quarterback, Baker Mayfield, Heisman candidate. Oklahoma State, though, they're 3rd in yards per play in the game, 2nd in the country in passing yards, 3rd in the country in points per game, led by quarterback Mason Rudolph, also a Heisman candidate. Both of these teams, neither one of them really have great defenses. We should see some sparks in this game, yes?
Yeah, I mean, both these teams average over 40 points a game. I actually thought the over-under being such a high number, 76, I actually thought that was a little low for this game. I thought it would be well into the 80s. And actually kind of have it different. CJ, I think these offenses are going to kind of do what they want. It's going to be can anybody stop the ball? So if I look at this and kind of like the last team with the ball is going to win the game. So that's where I'm at with it. I think the offenses are going to do what they want. Can any defense make a stop? Another thing interesting to me is the number, how comparable these teams are. So total yards per game, Oklahoma 586, yards per game for Oklahoma State 569, yards allowed Oklahoma 382, yards allowed Oklahoma State 358. Both of them score over 40 points a game, as I said. So they're very, very similar.
One of the things about Oklahoma, we talk about this high-flying offense, is sometimes this team's offense tends to take a step back in big games. Now, I know I can bring up Ohio State, and you're like, oh, but we won at Ohio State. Yes, but you scored 31 points. Against Iowa State, you only scored 31 points, and against Texas, you scored 29 points. Now, all of those sound like good numbers, but they are significantly lower than your team's average throughout the season. Oklahoma State, similarly, against Texas, only 13. Against TCU, only 31 points. When these teams get into big-time matchups, the offenses tend to take a step back. So, Chris, I'm going to look at that over-under, and it feels like it's low, but I think Vegas is going, we've got two highly ranked teams that offenses don't tend to play well against other highly ranked teams. I almost wonder if some of that over-under is low because of that, and it's almost like a tease.
Yeah. I kind of get that, but I don't think that's going to happen in this game. I think it's going to be a high-flying game.
Now, past 9 games, Oklahoma State 6-3 against the spread. They've been very, very good. Only loss on the season was that loss to TCU. Last week, they went into Morgantown, West Virginia, and just ripped apart the Mountaineers 50-39. Chris, they come back home, and the line here again, Cowboys favored by 2.5, over under 76 points. What's your prediction?
I'm taking Oklahoma in this all day. I think with Rudolph, they're just going to be they're not going to be able to be stopped. But again, the last team with the ball is probably going to win the game. I have Oklahoma winning 47-40.
47-40. Again, our predictions here score-wise are very, very close. The committee likes Oklahoma. But Vegas and the Sarragan ratings both have this team ranked much closer to Oklahoma State than Ohio State. The Sooners haven't been great on the road against the spread, and their defense has been utterly abysmal this season yet again. I'm going to take Oklahoma State, but I think it's a close back-and-forth game. Give me the Cowboys 47-44. Told you we were close.
Interesting.
Next game, local favorite Virginia Tech, the Hokies, coming off a big win against my love Duke. They head to Miami, to Florida, to play the Hurricanes, a night game. And Chris, interestingly enough, Hurricanes undefeated, but Virginia Tech favored by 2.5. A little bit surprised here?
Yeah, and I thought we talked about this game just briefly Wednesday, and I thought Miami was slight favorite then. So this line's moved at least 3 points since we talked Wednesday. So that's interesting.
Miami was a 1-point favorite. So that means when a line moves like that, that means a lot of people were putting money on Virginia Tech, and then Vegas made an adjustment yesterday.
Yep. For sure.
Now, you look at Virginia Tech, I think one of the reasons a lot of people are putting money on them is this quarterback, Josh Jackson. He's tossed 18 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions through their first 8 games. Chris, he looks like he might be the real deal.
Well, the only game he played against in a comparable defense was against Clemson, and they only scored 17 points. Looking at what he did the first game of the season against West Virginia, I was shocked. I was like, this kid is going to be amazing. So this is kind of, one game against a opponent I was wowed by, and the other game I was kind of like, he didn't do so well. So this is kind of the decision maker for me is how he shows up at this game.
No, I completely agree. It's a road game. It's a night game. This is going to be one where everybody in the country is watching. Listen, you come in. If Virginia Tech gets this win, This is the thing. If Virginia Tech gets this win, the rest of their schedule is Georgia Tech, Pittsburgh, Virginia. They're going to win out, be 11-1, and go into the ACC championship game ranked around 6th or 7th, meaning a win there and you're into the college football playoff. So tonight is going to be the big game for Virginia Tech. Can you go into Miami, get a big divisional win? And if you can't, there's going to be a lot of questions about you going into next year because the season is done. Chris, I think one of the things to like about Virginia Tech is this team lives by their defense. And that defense currently ranks 8th in scoring defense. It looks like Bud Foster is kind of back to his old tricks again.
Yeah, they only allow 11.5 points a game and 284 yards. That is astonishing in the ACC. But they haven't really played too many great offenses, so that's really that might be a part of that. But yeah, I agree with you. Their defense looks amazing. It's going to be a huge game, though. But I mean, you talk about what Virginia Tech needs of it. Look, if Miami wins, they're undefeated still, and has the
they'd have a signature win,
so to speak. Yeah, and the way they control their own destiny into if they go undefeated, there's no way the committee can hold them out. I mean, not in my opinion, not with all these teams with 1 losses.
Now, you look at Miami. This was a team that at the start of the year I predicted to make the college football playoff off of the fact that I thought they were going to go undefeated and you would have a bunch of one-loss teams. It's starting to shape up that way. But I honestly thought Miami, 8 games into the year, would be a lot better than game 1. And here I am, Chris. Last week they traveled to North Carolina, a team that, yes, needs a win, but a team that's been awful all season long. And Miami really struggled in that game. They've struggled a lot this year, struggled with Syracuse. I like the Hurricanes, but they don't have a signature win yet. The schedule's been weak, and I think the committee told you, we're not ready to buy this team, and the Saracen rankings have them at 18th. So I go into this game I think Miami's a little bit inflated in everybody's mind just because they're undefeated.
Yeah. It's tough. I mean, at the end of the day, if you see 12-0, you don't really care like what's in it, especially when they play in the ACC. And it's not really like they had Florida State lined up 3rd game of the season, so Florida State would have been a ranked team. Of course, we had the Hurricane, which postponed it. Syracuse is a decent team. UNC wasn't supposed to be this bad. Of course, Virginia Tech's on their schedule. They still have to play Notre Dame, UVA, who's playing well. So they still have some meat left on their schedule. That Notre Dame game next week is going to be big if Miami can win this week, huh?
Oh, yeah. No, if they win this week, that game against Notre Dame is going to be huge. One of the things I will say about last week's game against Carolina, if you're a Miami fan, this plays into your favor. Sometimes these teams are just desperate for a win, and they're desperate for a big win to kind of hang their hat on at the end of the season. A coach is going to put in more prep because he knows his job is on the line, and so sometimes you'll get an upset in that fashion. Regardless, I just think Miami looked way too sloppy in that game. One of the things the Hurricanes do really well, though, is they are 3rd in the country in sacks per game. And that against a freshman quarterback, Chris, I think could be a difference maker.
Yeah, their defense is huge and fast, and I think that they're going to put a lot of pressure on Virginia Tech's quarterback.
One of the things Miami doesn't do well is they get off to slow starts, and they rank 110th in the country in first half scoring, averaging just 10 points per first half a game. I don't think you can get away with that against Virginia Tech and win this one. Chris, line here, Hokies favored by 2.5, over under 50, so it's a bit of a low number. What do you have?
I'm a self-proclaimed Hokie hater, and that's not changing this week. I've got Miami winning by 10 points, 31-21.
I don't think the Hokies are going to run away with this one, obviously, but Miami has been struggling for weeks now. The key to this game will be if Miami gets off to another slow start. This team's been very good in the second half, but you aren't going to pull anything against Bud Foster. I'm going to take Virginia Tech to go into Miami, get the win, cover it by 2.5, 34-27. All right, let's go to our next game. Big college football rivalry, Chris. LSU at Alabama. The line here is Alabama by 21.5. The over-under, 48.5. I think there's a lot of good things to like about Alabama, but you're telling me you disagree with this and you think LSU has a legitimate chance to win.
I don't know about a legitimate chance to win. A legitimate chance to be in the game. So Alabama, maybe they're a little upset about dropping to number 2. I don't know. I just think that LSU over the past 5 games have looked pretty well, excluding that loss to Troy, which I don't know. That was kind of an anomaly. But they beat Syracuse before that. They beat Florida. They've got a win against Auburn, who's a good team here. So they're kind of turning their season around. They blew out Mississippi last week. So they've been able to kind of get things back on schedule here. And I just don't think that – I think that 21.5-point line might be a little inflated.
For the past several years, Chris, LSU has had one of the best rushing attacks in the country. They've got another one this season. The problem, though, is when they play Alabama – things tend to change. In their past 10 matchups, LSU has only averaged 116 yards against the Tide. What do you think of that?
Well, that's just, I don't know if a team averaged much more than that against maybe Clemson, just because what they've been able to do in the national championship games. But I think that's just Alabama. I don't think that really has anything to do with LSU. I think that just talks to the dominance about Alabama's defense.
LSU this season, you bring up that team, they're 3-5 against the spread, 87th in scoring offense, averaging just 25 points per game. So the offense really has not been great. You look at Alabama, though, Chris, they're only 4-4 against the spread. So this has been a team typically plays very, very well against the spread. This season, though, a lot of these games going underneath the point total, and you can pretty much bank on the opposition covering that point spread. What do you think of that? Because that, to me, is a bit alarming considering Saban's past history, where you'll see a 17.5 spread line, and then all of a sudden they win it by 30.
Well, they've done that quite a bit. I'm wondering what games here, because their last 5 games, you've got Tennessee, they won by 38. Arkansas, they won by 38. My lines just went away, but they beat another team. I think it was 66-0. Was that score? Let me get
66-3. That was Ole Miss.
Ole Miss, they won 66-3, beat Vandy 59-0. So those are pretty big wins. So I'm wondering what maybe it was towards the beginning of the season or
Texas A&M. I believe they were favored by about 20. Won that one by 8. Colorado State, they were favored by around 30. Won that one by 18. And then I think maybe Florida State, they were actually favored by more than 17 and only won that one by 17. So. A couple of those games thrown in here, and they haven't been great against the spread. This is a home against LSU, 8 o'clock matchup. Last year when they played, Chris, there was no offense until late in the fourth quarter, and Alabama pulled it out and won 10-0. That is a little bit concerning if you're a Tide fan, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I see happening again. I don't think it's going to go 0-0 into the fourth quarter, but I think it's going to be a lower scoring game. I think LSU's defense is going to step up. They're going to be able to move the ball somewhat. I think they're going to be able to put points on the board, but not necessarily, pull out a win.
One of the things about Alabama, I think, is a common misconception, is everybody likes to say they're very one-dimensional. They rank 87th in passing yards, so this seems likes to rush, right? Don't let that fool you. They are 5th in first half points per game, and most of the time by the fourth quarter, they've already won. So they're spending an entire quarter just trying to run out the clock. I think this team
completely agree.
I think this team can pass the ball. LSU has been one-dimensional for years. That, to me, I think is the difference maker. And I'm going to just say it out loud. Nick Saban versus Ed Orgeron. And I know last year was the same matchup, but Ed Orgeron had just stepped in for Les Miles. These kids were trying to play, again, with something to hang their hat on, and beating Alabama would have done that. This year, I think a loss here and the wheels start to come off for Ed Orgeron. Line here is 21.5 in Alabama's favor. Over under 48.5. Chris, we got to start moving quickly. What do you see with this one?
I don't see Alabama scoring 21.5 points, so that's why I like LSU. Give me the Tigers 21-15.
All right, he's got LSU. Wait, you've got the Tigers winning this one 21-15?
No. Bama winning 21.
Okay, Bama 21-15. Okay.
Yep.
All right, so Bama winning, Tigers covering the spread. Listen, LSU's got some nice talent. I don't think the coaching is there, though. Nick Saban comes up in these big games and tends to send a message in the middle of the year. I'm going to take Alabama winning this one big, 38-13. All right, let's shift over to the NFL now. Chris, Kansas City Chiefs playing at your Dallas Cowboys. This is a big one. Line here, Dallas favored by a point, and the over-under 52.
Yeah, this is going to be an awesome game to watch. I think it's going to be a great Sunday afternoon. It's a late game, so get your chili ready, CJ. I know you eat chili on Sundays, and just watch a good team actually play this week.
Okay, yeah, good team play. Kansas City, by the way, forced 5 turnovers in a 29-19 win against Denver last week. They are 6-2 against the spread this season. That, to me, is a remarkable number in the NFL. Because you liked Alex Smith at the start of the year, and he got off to this really nice start, completing 76% of his passes in their first 5 games. But in the past 3, he's only completing 56%. I'm a little bit concerned with that drop-off.
Well, the past 3 games he's played against Pittsburgh, Oakland, and Denver. Those are 3 of the toughest defenses in the league. So I'm not too concerned with that. No, I think he's still going to do well.
Cowboys this week without Ezekiel Elliott, is that a big deal?
It's a big deal, but not as big as people are making it. So they've got Alfred Morris and a couple other guys that can handle the ball. The strengths to their running game. Yes, it's Ezekiel Elliott, but more so it's their offensive line. Their offensive line can just move guys anywhere they want, so they're going to be able to continue to move the ball on the ground.
I think this team is good without Ezekiel Elliott, but I think people just think he's more easily replaceable than he is. If that were the case, then I don't think Jerry Jones and Jason Garrett would have been fighting the suspension as hard as they have been. I think this team will be missing something, but Dak Prescott, big games, he's come through before. Here's why I like Dallas. Forget the offense. Dallas is 4th in the league in sacks per game. This team finally has a real pass rush, and that's why I think Dallas all of a sudden has a chance to really make some noise in the playoffs. Chris, I think you losing Ezekiel Elliott means something. Dallas here, favored by 1, over under 52. Where do you go with your prediction on this one?
This is a very close one here again, CJ. I think Dallas being at home gives them the slight advantage to cover that line. Give me Dallas 24, Kansas City 21.
Well, we are very, very much in agreement here. I think Dallas defensively is going to put a lot of pressure on Alex Smith early on. They're going to force him to be creative, and he really struggles with that. I'm going with the defensive struggle early and a Dallas cover 27-24. They beat the Chiefs. Now let's get into our last game, and this one I think has a lot of intrigue because it could go a lot of different ways. Atlanta goes into Carolina. Chris, Falcons favored by 1.5. And the over-under here, 42.5. So Vegas is telling you, listen, Atlanta, worst record, don't care. We're going to take them in Carolina. And we think this one's going to be a really defensive ball game. I see that. It looks a little crazy compared to what all the press says. What do you see with this one?
Well, do you think Carolina straight had anything to do with this line? I mean, who are they going to throw the ball to?
Well, listen, the year Carolina went to the Super Bowl, the year Cam Newton had that incredible year, was the year Kelvin Benjamin was out for the year. So I do think there is something about him being more accurate when you are forcing him to get creative, when you are forcing him to look at all of the different options rather than Kelvin Benjamin first, and if he's not open after 3 seconds, then I'll look somewhere else.
Yeah, I forget who their other receivers were that year, but I think it was more of a running game, and they had other options as well. I think this year their offense has already kind of struggled, and taking away like their number one receiver and just kind of trading him away, saying who cares, is putting them in a bad spot. I hated that trade.
Carolina, Chris, ranks in the bottom 10 of the league in every offensive category except third down conversion. That I don't think bodes very well. But the defense has played good so far this season, and they rank 5th in the league. I kind of like what Ron Rivera is doing defensively, but the issues with Cam Newton in the press conferences, and we've talked about issues in the locker room, and now they lose Kelvin Benjamin. Are those issues just one too many for this team to win many more games? 5-3 in playoff position, but I think wheels could start coming off over these next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if this team goes 8-8. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I think 8-8 is probably where they're going to end up, maybe 7-9. They've got a pretty tough road ahead of them, and they've got a lot of interior issues. Maybe not less so on the field and more so off, but this trade was just pathetic in my opinion.
Atlanta started off the season looking like they were going to be very good, but they've lost 3 of their last 4, and they're only averaging 16 points per game in that span. Good news, though, is they're ranked 2nd in the league in yards per play at 6 yards. I like that, but Chris, I think the offense over the past several games has really, really struggled.
Yeah, they have. They only put up 7 points at New England. Miami beat them. They only scored 17 points in that game. Lost against Buffalo. Only scored 17 there. Yeah, their offense is struggling. I think you hit it on the head before the season started. I'm not giving up on Matt Ryan. I think he's a good quarterback, but you need the offensive coordinator there too to kind of run the ship.
Well, I think Matt Ryan is a good quarterback. What I disagreed with was him being the next coming of Tom Brady or him being one of the all-time legends. I think he's simply good, but he's very, very limited in what he can do. So, Chris, I look at this game. Cam Newton in a lot of emotional turmoil, locker room in trouble right now. But the Falcons don't do a good job at forcing turnovers. They're one of the worst in the league, averaging just half a takeaway per game. With all of that said, Atlanta favored on the road by 1.5, over-under 42.5. What's your prediction for this NFC South matchup?
I think this game's going to be very, very close. I have this thing where you take the home dog, and I'm going to stick with it even though it's only 1.5. But I also think Atlanta's going to win the game. So I've got Atlanta by a point, 24-23. Carolina covering the 1.5 point line.
Wow. Well, Carolina has a better record than Atlanta, and they've been better in recent games than the Falcons. Yet, Vegas has Atlanta favored. Why? I think it's because this Cam Newton situation is a lot worse than we thought, and Vegas has zero respect for this offense. The Falcons don't take advantage of turnovers, so that is something to pay attention to, but I'm going to take the Falcons to win this one 24-20. All right, Chris, running a little over today. Any closing thoughts as we end this Saturday 6 podcast?
This is going to be a great lineup of games here. We looked at a lot of games, and I thought this could be a 10-game slate for this weekend. So buckle up. It's going to be a fun Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, it is going to be fun. I'll be very interested to see that Virginia Tech-Miami game. I thank all of you all for tuning in. Now, we are going to be back Wednesday, 7 p.m., CJ Sweat Show. Find it on Facebook, iTunes, Spreaker, Google Play. Anywhere you can find a podcast, we're available too. I can guarantee it. Enjoy your weekend. This is the Saturday 6 podcast.